Hello, Willem.
Good morning, Lucas.
Good morning. Most people actually know you on Facebook as Guillermo Gallo.
That's
Uh,
right.
and if I understand correctly, that's the Spanish version of your name in Dutch.
Yes, my name in Dutch is Willem de Haan. When I, many years ago in Buenos Aires, want to make reservations for Milonga, by telephone, I understood that Willem de Haan doesn't make sense. So spontaneously, I said, Guillermo Gallo habla, and I got fantastic seats in the salon ever
Okay,
since.
that's
So
funny.
I keep this winner, and everybody knows me now in Buenos Aires like Guillermo Gallo.
Yes, so that's also your Facebook name, if I'm correct.
Mhm.
So there might
Yes,
be, it
because
might be.
I use Facebook mostly to stay in contact with Argentinian tango dancer friends.
Okay, okay. But you're from the Netherlands, like me,
Yes,
and you also dance in the Netherlands, I suppose.
in the Netherlands and in Buenos Aires.
Yes, yes, yes. But I meant like apart from Buenos Aires, so you also dance in the Netherlands, so people also know you here. And yes, can you tell me a bit about your before we start with the main topic of today? Can you tell me a bit about your personal? Well, maybe let's put it like this. Can you give us a very short introduction for people who don't know you about your profile?
Well, most relevant for this interview is that I'm a tango dancer. I've been dancing tango for 25 years. It all started as a Christmas present with my wife Kathy, who gave me 10 tango lessons. And I was reluctant, but we went to have a free trial. We learned the basic step and couldn't stop. I just loved the music.
Hmm.
I played the violin when I was a kid until I was a student. Um, and the music is so fantastic, and the level of the musicians of the great tango orchestras is amazing. And then to dance to that music, it's unbelievable. Like I was hooked. So the, after 2 years of practicing and taking lessons, we went with a group of the Academia de Tango in Amsterdam to Buenos Aires for the first time for 2.5 weeks. It was like a dream. And first we were afraid to go back because it would ruin the dream that we had. But then we went regularly, and every time we stayed longer. And over the last 7 years or so, we got to study 4 months a year to live and work in Buenos Aires. I say work because we also are researchers, and internet made it possible to stay there and do your work, stay in contact with your colleagues and friends, and so that made it much easier. And it is just wonderful to have two lives: one life in Buenos Aires and one life in Amsterdam.
Yes, yes. So I also interviewed your wife, Kathy, Kathy Davis. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video if anyone's interested in that. Some people might already know about it. Um, but yeah, this is the other side of the marriage, so to say. And
Yes.
yes, I know you are a very enthusiastic couple. And yeah, I also think it was really nice to hear that you were so interested in the music immediately, because a lot of people start because of the dance and dislike the music, and then they grow into the music and they eventually like it a lot or love it. But in
Mhm.
your case, you immediately liked the music, so
Yeah.
that's interesting. And what did you think about the dance when you started?
It wasn't easy. It was difficult. It took me a long time. And with repeat classes, I don't know how many times we had the class for Di Sarli or the class for Carlo, and etc. But yeah, slowly but surely, I I got it. And then we also took lessons in Buenos Aires from Jorge Firpo, Gustavo Navera, and most importantly, I ended by taking private lessons of Natasha Poberai, and she deconstructed my dancing, and then she reconstructed it again, and really changed me as a dancer. The way I dance was really thanks to her. And of course, a private lesson with such a great dancer is a gift, and inspiring. And like everybody, people walk naturally in a different way. So people dance naturally in a different way. I got my own style of dancing, I guess, but I feel very comfortable to dance in a very full milonga in Buenos Aires, in midst of all these moving bodies. I feel very happy. Although I must say, the quality of the music in the salons in Buenos Aires is often appalling. It's so loud, and so often the sound is so distorted, but the crowd is great and carries you along in the tanda.
Yes, and that's hard to find anywhere else, right?
Yeah. It's as if this music flows through all these bodies. They know the music, and you subconsciously you're aware of these are believers. They know what they're dancing to.
Yes. So, what are the places you like to go to in Buenos Aires to dance? Because you've been there until recently, right?
Yes.
Like a month ago or something?
Just in the middle of March, we came back to Amsterdam. Yeah. We have been there for 4 months first time after the pandemic.
Okay.
2 years in the pandemic, we couldn't go. We were caught in 2020, just in March. We were caught there in a lockdown and had to be repatriated by the Dutch embassy home, because we couldn't get out. There were no flights, and the airspace was closed, and only the embassies of France and the Netherlands worked together to get their remaining citizens out of the country.
Yes. So it must have been an emotional experience to finally get back.
It was tough, because before we got in contact with the embassy, contacting the airlines was just impossible. It was totally chaotic, and you were misinformed, and it was a lot of stress.
Yes. And this time, so what were some places you enjoyed going to dance?
Over the years, Salon Canning was a keeper. And from the beginning till it closed down, unfortunately, in last December, we've always been dancing in Canning. Now we're dancing in Lotuscelia, also an old and traditional salon. I love it there. And since Canning closed, we were dancing there 4 times a week this winter, and their summer, of course. And so, yeah, I'm a traditional tango dancer.
Yes.
And I like to keep it a little simple, go with the flow in the ronda, and especially enjoy the music while you're dancing, and the connection with your partner. These are things that are the most important to me.
Yes, it's lovely how. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I'm not going to Buenos Aires to show off my steps and my moves to the Argentinian crowd.
No. I find it quite interesting how culturally integrated you are there. So you also speak Spanish, I believe.
I didn't speak Spanish when we went there the first time, but tango helped me learning Spanish. I wanted to understand some of the lyrics, so I started to read the lyrics in the beginning with the dictionary. Now it's all very easy with internet. You just put it into a translation machine, and there it is.
Yes.
A rough translation. But I had to do it the hard way. Some of the friends would talk to me in Spanish and would be very patient and helping me along to learn it. And well, I have to admit, I'm a little proud to have learned to speak Spanish bastante fluently in my age. And people say it's getting more difficult with age to learn a new language. So, but I did it. I feel comfortable, and one of the motivations to learn to speak every day Spanish in a salon was I got so bored with the question, "Where are you from? How long are you? How long are you going to stay? What do you think about the weather? Can you stand the heat?" I wanted to talk about different things, so I had to learn more than that.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, that's a good observation, because if you want to talk about something else, usually you are the one who has to initiate that, like, but with a certain remark, like, I like how this music combines whatever, and then you get a conversation based on what you're saying. So
Exactly, and now often I get the reaction when I comment on the lyric of a song that we just danced to. Then the reaction is, "Oh, you guys from Europe, you know so much more about tango than we do."
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah,
So,
because for some of them, it's just dancing. It's also social,
yeah.
even to the extent that they're chatting away while they're dancing. I don't like that very much, but it's part of the salon culture. You have to deal with it.
Yes. Yes. So last question about this. Um, so what is the number one reason you keep coming back to Buenos Aires for so long every year?
Couple of things. The weather. It's nice to have 2 summers a year. I love the city. I feel so great to know my way around in Buenos Aires. You can put me anywhere in the city. I open my eyes, I know where I am, more or less. And the people, they're warm. They're warm. They're inclusive in general. So there's also a lot of love and hate because not everything is perfect in Argentina. But you got to deal with that, and like I said before, it is wonderful to have 2 lives.
Yes.
Makes you feel young.
Yes. So for the rest of the interview, there's another introduction, and in that sense, like, I'd have to know something about your professional background, and yeah, how you got into this subject that we are discussing today.
Yeah. Well, I'm a professor emeritus in criminology, the study of crime. That's my professional work. And I studied violence for many years. But when I retired, I was invited to join the VU University, free universities, they say, in Amsterdam, with a group of criminologists, young criminologists, and they were studying what they call international crime. That's crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. And I was intrigued by that because that's also violence, but at a much larger scale. And then going back and forth to Argentina, I was interested in the military dictatorship and the disappearance of Argentinians, of many young protesters and opposition and artists and journalists as a form, and one Argentinian sociologist also called it a genocide. What happened in Argentina, and then I came. I stumbled over something that I hadn't realized. Some of my colleagues were interested in corporate involvement in these crimes against humanity and genocide. And I started to look at Dutch multinationals like Philips, Axo, and others. And I found that the multinational Axo Nobel had plants, industry, factories in Argentina, where workers disappeared during the dictatorship. And my research was to find out to what extent this multinational was involved, that they knew what was happening. And I could show with documents that the CEO of that company had traveled to Argentina, had been in this factory in La Plata, had talked to the Ministry of Economic Affairs of the junta, Martinez de Os. And so I wrote an article about corporate involvement of Axo Nobel with the disappearance of workers in Argentina. Then they threatened me with a court case if I would publish that. But fortunately, the rector of the university and the university lawyer, they supported me, and I could go ahead with publication. And of course, it was a threat. Nothing happened after that. But I couldn't take the risk and lose all my pension over lawyer costs. And my wife Kathy said, you're not going to do this. But the rector did the right thing and protected academic freedom of publication. And I was very happy with that and very grateful that they did that and saw that as their responsibility.
Yes.
I also supervised a PhD student, and one of the chapters of her study was the company in Nazi Germany that was building the gas ovens for the concentration camps, a very dark subject. And when I wanted to publish this work on Argentina, they wanted me to write some background to this corporate involvement, and I had to write something about the corporations in Germany that were involved in the war industry and also the genocide in different ways. So I was already prepared with some idea of Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, genocide, etc. When in Buenos Aires, in the famous bookshop El Ateneo, I was looking for something to read, and found an Argentinian book about the Holocaust, and there was a paragraph about music in the Holocaust, and I read that the tango was played by the orchestra of prisoners in the camp of Buchenwald. And I thought, what? I couldn't believe it. The tango that we love so dearly, that music was played in that context. I couldn't believe it. But I went on the internet, and then I found that there were stories that the tango Plegaria was played in the camp of Auschwitz by the orchestra of prisoners when men, women, and children were moved towards the gas chambers. And so that was even more terrible, because then I thought, Plegaria, the tango that we all know so well, are we dancing to this contaminated kind of music, which carries the history of the Holocaust? So that's that's how I started, more or less by chance. I started this this research into the legend of the Tango of Death.
So you're saying the legend, the myth. So can you explain what exactly, like, why, like the background of this myth? Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. I call it a legend because a colleague in social anthropology explained to me the difference between a legend and a myth. And he said, no, what you're talking about is a legend. And he strictly speaking, he's right. A myth is a story about something that never happened. And a legend is a story which at least has some reality, some truth in the story. And this is exactly the case with the story about the Tango of Death. Because I was first, I thought these are kind of obscure sources where this story comes from, and the stories were different. It was not very coherent. So I was skeptical about this, but then I found just one sentence in a famous book about the Holocaust by a Dutch historian about the destruction of the Jewish people in Holocaust. And it said there was a camp where the orchestra was forced to play a tango of death, and there is a photo of this. And I started to look for this photo, and I found the photo and discovered that this photo was shown at the Nuremberg trial in 1946 by the Soviet prosecutor to charge that in the camps, the concentration and extermination camps, orchestras or executions took place to the sounds of music, often played by camp orchestras of prisoners. So at that moment that I realized that this was a charge in the Nuremberg trial put forward by the Soviet prosecutor, my curiosity as a tango dancer was substituted with my professional interest as a criminologist of international crimes in this topic that apparently music was part of what we call the modus operandi of a genocide. And so that's when I decided that this is something for me to seriously look into and find out what is it all about with this Tango of Death.
Yeah, so just for some context, so you've written a book like an about this topic.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. So is this like it's a bit of a weird question maybe, but is it like a purely academic work, or is it more like popular like criminology, so to say?
Yeah. No. It is a purely academic work. You know, I'm not a historian, but a criminologist. But this is historical research. So I always felt you're skating on thin ice.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be very careful. So I made sure that for everything I was claiming in this book, I had plenty of documents and or testimonies or other data to support these claims. And that means that it's full of footnotes and references and all that to make these claims. And that makes the book academic. and therefore it's published with an academic publisher.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I personally have a background in history, so I wonder. So did you get any help from like historians for this, or was it purely your own incursion into history when writing this?
No, in writing, I didn't get very much help from historians. I did get some help from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. The musicologists there, they provided me with some documents, or they would look into certain files for me, etc. I was very grateful for that. Or a musicologist from Australia. I mean, never met these people.
No.
It's just colleagues who were enthusiastic and willing to help a colleague, especially during the pandemic. Large part of these books were researched and written during the pandemic. So you were limited in your possibilities. You couldn't travel to an archive and things like that. So that was really nice, and I'm very grateful for that. But no, I didn't have a supervisor. I had to.
Okay. Yeah. But that's quite interesting, because it becomes like a multidisciplinary kind of study, because it's probably grounded in criminology, and your interest in, for example, how courts work, like how this persecution worked. But still, it's also pure history in many ways, and music history as well.
Yeah.
So I would say that, like, I would suppose that it was probably a nice challenge for you after a long career of being in one field, that you have to kind of think out of the box and create something new.
Yeah, but I already had some experience with historians when I tried to connect the field of international crimes and war crimes with history. I remember I gave a talk, and I didn't get much response, and it was about right and wrong. This was a colonial history, and they said, "Yeah, but Willem, but what you're arguing is purely anachronistic." And I felt insulted, and I spent 2 years studying anachronism and claiming that it does make sense to look at the past with our current values and our current insights, and discuss what happens in the past. And it applies to slavery, and it also applies to the Holocaust. And so I had my battles with historians already, and you could say in part that by insulting me, they inspired me enormously to move into that field in my own way.
Okay. So coming back to the topic, so what was your like hypothesis of this research? How did you begin the research? What did you want to find out or show?
I wanted to understand what was behind this story of the Tango of Death. You could say simply what really happened. What were the underlying facts of this story? But maybe more importantly, I wanted to understand why this story apparently speaks to people's imagination. It captures their imagination, and it's reproduced constantly in art, in literature, in film, in video, on the internet, what have you. And every time this story comes back, often accompanied by this photo of the orchestra, where the prosecutor said, "This is the orchestra of Camp Janowska." That was a camp in the city of Lviv. in what is now Ukraine. And in the picture, this orchestra is playing a special melody composed as a tango of death to accompany torture, selections, executions, and the like in this camp. And the same happened in other camps, and it was supported by the leadership of the Nazis, and it happened all over the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe in these concentration and extermination camps. That was the charge. So I had to go back to find out what really happened in this camp Yanovska in Ukraine, in Lviv, and then try to understand why this story touches people or captures their imagination and is being reproduced constantly. So that was not my hypothesis, but it was my research question.
Yeah, so it's also, apart from history, it also sounds like some kind of cultural study or like a psychological study in a way. Like, why does this
Yes, maybe we could talk about that later, but if you call it a hypothesis, but it was not a hypothesis I had at the beginning. It was an interpretation that I developed over time, that it speaks to people because we tend to believe and like to believe that music is something good, that music gave the prisoners in the camps hope, consolation, maybe supported them to hang on, even to resist, and unfortunately, my research shows that music was abused in the camps by the Nazis in many different ways to, as I said, as a modus operandi of the Holocaust.
Yeah, let's talk about that first. So because I was still talking about like the research process, but let's just look at some findings first, because I think that's most interesting to people to really understand what's going on now. So what did you find about what was it really like? So it's not just about tango, but about musicians in the camps. What are your findings?
Yeah, many of these camps had orchestras, and it started already with the early concentration camps where political prisoners were detained, and then other camps also formed their own orchestra. It gave the camps kind of prestige to show off with an orchestra that could play music for entertainment or give concerts, or when there were official visits of high-rank Nazis, they could show off the orchestra and play some music. But the reality of these orchestras was that they were not playing only for entertainment of the Nazis or sometimes for the prisoners, but that the music was an aspect of daily life in the camp, to discipline, to punish, to humiliate, to deceive, etc. One of the important tasks of these orchestras was to play march music in the morning and the evening when the prisoners were marched off or came back from forced labor. And you can understand, when you move out or you move large numbers of people, the most efficient way to do that is in rows of 4, marching like military style. And they would play at roll call in the appel in the morning, where they counted the prisoners. They had to stay out in the cold for sometimes for hours, but there was the orchestra playing music. The orchestra had to play, they were forced to play, and they were ordered to deceive. When new arrivals, for instance, in Auschwitz, new arrivals in Birkenau, the trains came in, there was an orchestra, so to welcome them with music, and of course that had the effect to calm them down, to make them believe that a place where there's such nice music played to welcome you cannot be that bad. So that was to deceive. The music was also played to humiliate and torture. For instance, when a prisoner tried to escape but was caught, this person would be brought back and exposed in front of the other prisoners, and be tortured, for instance, by having to sing hurrah, hurrah, I'm back again, things like that. And then he would be executed, hanged, or shot. And so and then also to terrorize the other prisoners. This was not easy for the musicians, and some of the musicians they couldn't do it after a while, and chose to end their lives because they just couldn't stand it anymore. But for other musicians, it was a chance to survive, and some of them really have survived and explained how being selected as a musician for the orchestra basically saved their lives in retrospect, because the conditions were a little better. They got better food. They got time to rehearse, and they were together. So socially, that all that helped them to survive. But the ugly reality is that music was not only a positive thing in the camps, but it was really abused systematically by the guards and by the Nazis in general, to implement a regime of deception, discipline, punishment, execution in the camps.
Yeah, so in the beginning you talked about what another scholar said was a difference between a myth and a legend, and that like a myth is, if I remember correctly, or that like at least in a legend there's some truth to what's what people think. But in this case you also have that, because as you say, like it was not only positive, but maybe like there were some positive aspects about it. Can you talk about that? Like the you were saying like people think music is inherently good, and then you said it's actually it was used in a much different way, which is negative. But then, so are there also ways in which it was good?
Yes, the prisoners would sing. Again, sometimes they were forced to sing. They had to sing when they marched, or they had to sing when they worked. But they also were singing among themselves. Some of them created songs to melodies that they remembered, and some of these songs are recovered and documented, and some of them are tangos. So there is, for instance, the tango of Auschwitz, based on a Jewish song from the ghetto of Warsaw, which then had words explaining the conditions in Auschwitz. So these songs, in a way, document the suffering of the prisoners, their experience, their hopes, their despair, and no doubt some prisoners took courage or consolation being able to sing together. Or they would sing when they were celebrating someone's anniversary, etc. That music was part of camp life, but there is this dark side to music in the camps. Unfortunately, we cannot see it as solely as a positive force. But coming back to your question about the legend and the myth, the fact is that there was this camp, Janovska, in the city of Lviv in Ukraine. There was a large camp orchestra of about 40 musicians from the orchestras in Lviv, from the opera in Lviv. They were professional music. They're in the photo. And there are testimonies that they had to play tango at executions, at selections of people for deportation to an extermination camp nearby, or to be killed by bullets in the sands outside the camp. There's evidence of that. But over time, this story was told, and then you get the versions of Argentinian tango historians, for instance, who say in Auschwitz, the orchestra played a tango of death, plegaria, when men, women, and children were driven to the gas chambers. You see, over time, there is a conflation, a putting together of many different stories that all hang together with the story of the tango of death. That goes so far that there is this story that Hitler personally ordered plegaria to be played in all the concentration and extermination camps after he visited a barbecue at the embassy of Argentina in Berlin, showed great interest in the way lamb was roasted by the asador, and ceremoniously took the first bite to open the buffet. And as we know that Hitler by then was a strictly vegetarian, it's highly unlikely that all this happened. That is a myth. But this myth flows together and makes believe that plegaria was really played in Auschwitz to accompany Jews going to the gas chamber. That's how a legend develops and transforms over time. So it's a conflation of many different stories. There were no gas chambers in Lviv, in Camp Janovska. So the basic story, the actual history of what happened there, has been transformed. And now, if you go to the internet and you look at Tango of Death, you get dozens and dozens of videos, one even more vulgar than the other, all called Tango of Death, often showing the photograph of the orchestra, and then displaying tango dancers in crazy poses and what have you.
Yeah.
And actually, the history of what happened in that camp and with that orchestra, all the musicians of which have been killed, no one survived. is distorted and lost, and that's very sad. I believe.
Yeah. So essentially, your claim is that Plegaria was not the tango of death. Let's talk about what you found instead. So you said that there were musicians playing music in the camp. So we traced all that, and we now know, we have established how that worked. But what music were they actually playing? And of course, who were these musicians? They were mostly Jews, but it has to do with also with what they played. So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, you have to understand that before the war, tango was very popular in Europe, and Argentinian tango orchestras like Bianco, with his Plegaria as a major hit, was touring from Paris to Madrid to Berlin, etc. And people danced tango, but nowhere tango was more popular than in Poland, and especially in Warsaw. The historians who have shown that 75%, 3 out of 4 popular hits were tangos at the time. Initially, these orchestras, they didn't tour all the way to Warsaw. The Polish learned tango through LP records and through the radio. But the famous tangos like La Comparsita, Choclo, Adios Muchachos, and Plegaria, Yira Yira, they all were available on LP in Polish versions with Polish text, often with text that were not translations of the lyrics of these Argentinian tangos, but they invented new lyrics that sounded well to their ears and seemed to fit the music. That was around 1930. But in the 1930s, Polish tango became more and more Polish and less Argentinian. And one of the most important composers and band leaders was Jerzy Petersburski. And he created many tangos, was highly successful. And one of the tangos he created, and their most popular one, like Plegaria was the most popular hit of Bianco, the most popular hit of Petersburski was O Donna Clara and To Ostatnie Niedziela, that last Sunday. And that last Sunday, that is a melody that many survivors later have identified as the tango that the orchestra in Janowska in Lviv was playing at selections for deportation or execution.
Yeah, so that's the most important thing you found, like that you can prove through actual sources that was, and it's also historically the most likely thing they were probably playing, right?
Yeah, and it makes sense. It makes sense because that was a hit in Poland and Ukraine. Lviv was very close to the Polish border, as you know, and so culturally, that was the same cultural environment, and Polish musician would play in Lviv, and the other way around. So Plegaria, To Ostatnia Niedziela, was a Jewish tango. The composer was Jewish, the musicians were Jewish. If you listen to it, you might hear klezmer music elements in the song. It's much more likely that these musicians know this melody and could play it by heart, because that was the hit in the late 1930s in that area. And so, unlike what the prosecutor said in Nuremberg, there was not a special melody composed for this occasion of the executions, but it was, according to survivors, it was this last Sunday tango by Jerzy Petersburski.
Yes, and also maybe as far as like the idea of a tango of that, like in popular culture, that sounds like a tango that plays when you're going to the gas chambers at Auschwitz, but it seems to be different than that, because you were actually saying before that when people arrived in these big camps, they would actually play music that was cheerful. So in other words, it seems like the tango of that is more like has to do with like executions by fire, or than with mass extermination through gas. Or can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, I think part of the explanation is that Auschwitz is the example that people know about concentration and extermination camps. So if people talk about the Holocaust, they talk about Auschwitz. So if they talk about the Tango of Death, it's got to be in Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, everybody knows that in Auschwitz were gas chambers. That is Auschwitz-Birkenau, the extermination camp. So it's got to be there. This is how a legend develops over time.
Yes,
different elements, and then the story is created in order to make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not even like anyone is doing this on purpose. It's just how it naturally propagates.
That is how collective memory works.
But there has been maybe someone who did it on purpose. So you were talking about this Soviet prosecutor, and before we had a chat about this before the interview, you said that some of the things he said may have been influenced by propaganda. So is that also maybe a reason why the truth was distorted a bit, whereas actual survivors said something else?
Yeah, I think the claim that this happened in all the camps in a similar way, that was an exaggeration for propaganda purposes. The prosecutor in Nuremberg wanted to show to the world how perverse the Nazis were, and having beautiful music played as such an ugly thing as an execution, that is something that calls to people's imagination. That's why I think they use this example in Nuremberg. Later in the verdict of the trial, music in the camps didn't play a role, wasn't even mentioned. But the story in February 1946 went out immediately. It was the next day in the Jerusalem Post, and it found its way all over the world, and then it became a legend, because legends offer you the opportunity to imagine what happened, to talk about it, to think about it, to discuss it, etc. And that's why I think that this story of the Tango of Death offers us an opportunity to remember and to talk about what happened. And that is what I'm trying to do with this book and with interviews, and also with presentations, like we'll do on the 4th of May, the Remembrance Day in Holland, in Amsterdam. We will talk about the musicians in the camp, and we will remember this story of the Tango of Death.
Yeah, so before we talk about that, I just want to say, like, what this prosecutor said was not totally detached from reality either, because it was in fact a very perverse system, using music for discipline and punishment and executions and even deceiving. So it's not like that's completely out of, but yeah, maybe he did add something to the creation of this legend. So that's one thing we could yeah.
What he charged was based on investigations. So even before the end of the war, the Soviets had investigations commissions, and there was a special commission looking at war crimes committed in the area of Lviv. And this commission wrote down testimonies about this Tango of Death being played in the camp at executions. That went to Moscow. In Moscow, the documents for the Nuremberg trial were prepared, and that's how the story came to Nuremberg. And also the photograph. I have a whole chapter about the photograph. Who took the photograph and how did it get to Nuremberg with this orchestra? And people recognized the conductor and the first violin player. These are historical documents, and they were part of the files in the Nuremberg trial. So the prosecutor was talking on the basis of what these investigation commissions into war crimes had presented and had found.
Yeah, so just moving on, so we established what music was played at the camps. So it's probably mostly Polish tangos or other European, Polish Jewish tangos or other European tangos, melodies, popular melodies. So I just wanna know a bit more about who were these people who played the music, who were these musicians, like to give them a bit of a face. So you mentioned one who composed this important tango, but in general, what, like these people who were playing music, were they professional musicians, classical musicians?
Yeah, in the Janowska camp, where the story of the Tango of Death originated, there were a remarkable number of professional musicians. And that is because the city of Lviv had a large Jewish community for centuries. They had a very developed musical life. They had several orchestras, symphony orchestras, philharmonic orchestras, and they had a national opera. And all these orchestras had professional music. There were 2 conservatories in Lviv. So they had plenty of professional musicians to choose from to form an orchestra in this camp. In Auschwitz, we know from Dutch survivors who played in these orchestras that they also selected amateur musicians, and some tried hard and found themselves very lucky to be selected and to have a chance to survive. Not all of them did, but some did, and have written memoirs or given testimony of what playing in the orchestra was like, what they had to do, what they played, etc. And this is all material that we can study.
Yes, yes. So let's move on to some of the conclusions of what we've been talking about in your book. So first of all, about Plegaria. So your thesis is that Plegaria was not a tango of death, and probably not even very difundido, widespread. So should we still avoid this? Because part of the myth among us tango dancers and DJs is that we shouldn't play Plegaria, which is actually a good dance song by Fresedo Ruiz. We shouldn't play it because it's contaminated, like you said in the beginning of this interview. But in a way, you say it's would it be fine to play, or is it?
Yes, I think there's no reason not to play Plegaria, because it's the tango of death with this whole story, because it's not. It's become part of the story of tango of death over time. That's based on misinterpretation. I can't go into all the details how that came about, but I believe it's a misinterpretation. And but more important than whether or not we dance to contaminated music, I think as tango dancers, but also as human beings, we need to be aware, and we need to remember the Holocaust and what happened. And it's more important to be aware that music played a part in the Holocaust, that it was abused in the camps, that people not only enjoyed music, but they suffered from music. And that is why I give an example in the book, which really appalled me, took my breath away. It's a video I encountered where two professional dancers dance in neo-tango style to the theme of Schindler's List, played by a violinist and a harp, I think, and professional musicians. And they give this performance, and they do all their neo-tango moves to this song, which is from the film Schindler's List. I don't have to explain what Schindler's List is about. And this particular song is a Jewish lullaby. And in the film, it is played when Jews are marching toward an uncertain future. And we know what that uncertain future was like, the destruction of the Jewish people. Now, how the hell can you not know that? And how the hell, what do you think when you perform in neo-tango style to that song? There are other tangos in Schindler's List. Baruna Cabeza, for instance, they could have danced to that. And I find it not only distasteful, I find it and ignorant, but I'm really offended that people should do that. And that's, to me, that's so much worse than dancing to Plegaria. So
yes,
let's forget about Plegaria, I would say.
Yes. So you said you're going to give a presentation here in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, on the 4th of May.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a bit about that for people who might be well, actually, the thing is that yeah, what's the meaning of this day for because you chose it.
5th of May is our National Liberation Day. That is the day that the entire country was freed by the Allied forces. So in Amsterdam, for instance, the Canadians crossed the bridge of the river, and the city was free, and the people were celebrated, and they went crazy, overjoyed of this liberty. And I grew up with stories about that. But the day before, and especially the evening before Liberation Day, is the commemoration of the death. And at 8 o'clock, we used to be silent. And in my youth, I remember that even people would stop their cars in the street, step out of the car, and stand still next to their car in commemoration. It's not like that anymore, but there's still a ceremony in Dam Square where the king is putting flowers to the national monument. There are thousands of people watching this. Then before and after, there are all kinds of manifestations and small and large events to commemorate. And as part of that organization for May 4 and May 5th, we offer a presentation in our tango salon about the musicians in the camp and the story, what they were doing there, why some survived and others perished, and what it was like, what the music was used for, this idea that music was something good. No, it was not. Not only it was abused, etc. And then we will end with the unknown musicians, like in the photograph of the Janowska camp that this story of the Tango of Death is about. And there are only a few whose name we know, and the others are still unknown, but we can see them, we can look them in the face in this photograph, and they're, as it were, they're asking us to identify them, to know who they are. And that is what commemoration is about.
Yes. So, do you have any like photos to show us now of your?
I can show you the photo of the orchestra. Yes.
So I think I've already allowed you to share your screen, so you can.
Can you see it?
No, not yet.
And now?
No, I'll just.
Oh, I have to do the share screen myself.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it yet right now. Yes, now it's something showing up.
Yep. This is the picture of the orchestra, and the photo here you see that it's the numbers of the Nuremberg trial. And here's another picture of the same orchestra in the camp. That is the orchestra that I'm talking about.
Yes.
And you see there, they have instruments that you expect in an orchestra, like wind instruments, that you not usually hear in a tango orchestra. It's a quite big orchestra. And this is in the camp, and there is a drawing from this orchestra in the same formation from a survivor of the camp who made many drawings about what happened in the camp. And there is a drawing of this orchestra standing in front of the camp office, playing in this way. But of course, you cannot claim that they're playing the Tango of Death here, because there's no way to know what they're playing.
Yes. So do you have anything else left that will be interested concerning what we've talked about?
Well, this is what we're going to do on the 4th of May.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe this picture from yeah.
This picture is of Artur Gold. Artur Gold was a famous violin player from Warsaw, and he was in the Treblinka extermination camp. They didn't have a camp orchestra, but he was able to form a small ensemble of a handful of musicians, and a survivor of Treblinka, who is a sculptor. He created sculptures of camp life, and one of the sculptures is of Artur Gold and 2 other musicians in Treblinka. So,
well, thank you for the pictures.
yeah.
Let me see if there's anything left to discuss. Yeah, maybe just one final question. So it's hard to find out like how Argentine this phenomenon was, because we've mostly established that it was most likely very Polish, Jewish, local, and European, and that there may have been some famous tunes that were previously more popular, like El Choclo and maybe Plegaria. But I like, it was not necessarily part of your study, right? To find out how many Argentine tangos were played at these concentration camps, and it would be hard to really know, right?
There is some history of Polish tango that I'm aware of, and that's what I talked about before. That Argentinian tango came to Poland through LPs and radio. People danced a lot in Warsaw. The pictures of that, you see how they dance tango. A little different, but elegant. And but over time, and I think that's so interesting, that over time Polish composers started to make their own tangos. Like in the Netherlands, we have Karel Kraaienhof, who not only plays tangos, but he creates tangos. He's a composer of, I don't know how many tangos he has composed. They're wonderful, and they're keeping tango alive in a way that's great. And that's what these composers did in Poland. There are many of them, and there were many orchestras, composers like Gold, like Vars, and well, I can't remember all the names, but you'll be amazed how big Polish tango was.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I didn't know about that. I know it was a thing. I knew it was a thing, but considering how something that's originally Argentinian became so, it's like the dance itself now. Like it's so global, and it's not just Argentinian, and some people like it more in Argentina, like you and me, but it doesn't mean like that tango can be danced very well in the rest of the world. So it's like with the music, it's the same. And
I was one time in Salon Canning. There was a performance of two Polish tango dancers, and they did a little performance on Polish tango music. And I was very curious to see how the Argentinians would, the porteños, how they would respond to that. And I can't tell you, I couldn't read their minds, but it was something they didn't expect. Let's put it this way.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was global tango, but then in Salon Canning in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, turn back local in a way. Yeah, that's funny.
They brought it back to them.
Yes. Well, thanks. I think that's also maybe some of the positive messages of today, because it was obviously quite a rough topic, especially considering that people may have had other expectations about music in concentration camps. So it's a dark topic, but at the same time, it's also beautiful how people survived, maybe because of it. Some people survived because they could play music and they had better conditions, and there's so much like a big cultural legacy that was not destroyed by the Holocaust. They maybe after the war, like this Jewish music scene was mostly destroyed, but it doesn't mean like now that there's no memories of it, and I'm sure there are people listening to that music as well nowadays, just like we are listening to the Argentine music. So it shows the also the power of culture and human creativity, instead of just the suffering that's also inherent to the world. But
and many of the lyrics are about this longing and suffering and memories that are documented in the tango lyrics. I should not forget to mention one thing that we didn't talk about, and that is Yiddish tango. There a lot of tango in Poland was also in Yiddish, and actually there was a version of this Last Sunday tango in Hebrew. And it was sung by a Polish tango singer who had a Jewish artistic name, Ben Levy, and there was an LP especially made in Hebrew to be exported to Palestine for tango lovers over there. But Jewish tango, especially tango in Yiddish, has its own tradition, and that is there are young musicians who are trying to revive that, to recover that, academics who study it, and you can find on the internet, you can performances in Yiddish tango, where the past is recreated and brought alive again.
Yeah, so thank you for the interview, for all these interesting things.
Thanks for inviting me, Lucas. You're very welcome.
Yes, and I will link the things that that are important in the description, like your book, or maybe if people want to contact you, can I also put your Facebook profile there? Maybe if they have questions about this, I don't know. Is that all right? Yeah, and I hope people found this interesting. I did find it very interesting and very refreshing. Yeah, thanks, and see you hopefully soon.
Thank you, Lucas.
And good luck with your lecture.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.